Okay, this is sort of a perfect follow-on, I hope, because I'm also pretty much concerned, running a VR company, pretty much concerned about the future of VR. And I want to tie into some of the points that were made already after a quick introduction. Yes. Okay, so I'm co-founder of Black Cell, which is the first Austrian VR studio, which is not saying much because Austria is a pretty small country. We have a couple of VR titles as well. The first one we released ourselves on Steam with an average user score of 9% and 10 of 10 review ratings, which is great, but we released it for free, so it didn't make any money. But we thought the same thing. We built a name for ourselves, and that allowed us to go into creating a title for Star VR, IMAX VR. We're currently working with Starbreeze on an exclusive Star VR experience, which is quite interesting because it's an arcade-only experience, and that's obviously very different from trying to sort of a wider consumer product. And we're also working on a health title that is actually treating ADHD, which is ironic because this is what people get when they play too many games. But anyway, I've been in the industry for almost 3 decades by now. I've founded 4 companies. And the fact that I'm still not rich shows you that I'm probably stupid. Very quickly, because we've already been through that. Obviously, we're all valley of disappointment, blah, blah, blah. The fact that this room is packed with 20 people and the next room is packed with 200, where it's about monetization of mobile titles, goes to show that we are not there yet. And the question is, why aren't we there? And we had a couple of reasons on the previous slide. One of the things that I find interesting is when you ask industry people, a lot of them talk about inadequate content offerings. And then the next thing almost immediately is the reluctance of consumers to buy VR, which is kind of weird because you're blaming the people for not buying your stuff, which is like saying you didn't understand that it's great. They need to be made aware how good it is. And for me, that's kind of the other way around. If we haven't convinced people to spend £1,000 or euro on something where they will buy an iPhone for 500 probably, then we've done something wrong. It's not, and I would say it is not the technology per se. And it's also, if that is true, then it's not going to be solved with the next VR or the next AR generation of technology. Because I think we have an essential problem that is deeper, or that is sort of part of what we are failing to do to a degree. And that is not just the fact that the headsets are bulky and it's expensive and anything else. It's obviously one of the facts, but it's not that. A good and relevant, I think, comparison is if you look at Switch versus VR. And that's weird because Switch is just one console. VR is a whole platform and technology. But if you look at the expectations, like there's a Kickstarter for Oculus, everybody goes, ooh, holodeck tomorrow, and then there's a big hype, and then the hype explodes, and then the thing is, what it ends up as is it's expensive and it's mostly crap. If you look at Steam or Oculus Store today, most of the experience isn't that great, apart from a couple of guys. Obviously, you guys make great games, but the other guys don't. And then now we're at like where we've been at. It's going to explode in 2018. Now maybe it's going to pick up in 2020. And my question is, why should it? Why should it pick up if you can't get people interested in the current thing? Do you think a shinier version of the headset will make them more interested? Compare that to the Switch. Initially, everybody was like, hey, this is like there's mobile phones that do games and there's consoles that do games. Why on earth would we have to have a thing that's both but not either? And then they see the first examples like, hey, this doesn't have good graphic powers and technology is not really there. And then they go, Zelda. And everybody buys a Switch. And then they go, this is actually nice. And now they got Labo, and that's even nicer, and everybody wants to play with it. This is, for me, a point where it's clear that the technology application is important, obviously, but the content, and this is an old console wisdom, is king. So if you look at Zelda, which is sort of the killer app for the Switch, it had an over 100% attachment rate. So there's more people buying Zelda than having a Switch. Obviously, because that's also because it worked on the Wii U. But mainly, it's everybody who bought that console bought Zelda. Can you name one title that everybody, like if we have, I think the number was 4.6 million mobile headsets out there. which would be a great market if everybody bought one title. But if you look at that and look at the separation and the fracturation of the market, then you see that even on mobile, you're going to sell what, 100,000, 200,000 for what, 99 cents. This is not going to be a sustainable business. We don't have anything that compares to that. We have a lot of technology, we have a lot of hardware investment, and everybody's investing in hardware, but nobody's making software that makes people want that. Because we all automatically assume people automatically want that because it's a great immersive experience. But what's immersion really? Games already offer immersion. This is just better immersion. So what's our answer to the killer app? It's the spectacle. Currently, this is part of the thing. Like, immersion is great, and now I feel like I'm in this. Now I feel like I'm right there. And we've seen a couple of examples. The spectacle is good. Arcade, we are doing something ourselves. The Greenpeace thing we heard about this morning is great, because it really is about giving you an experience, and VR can support that tremendously well. But it's a momentary thing. It's like going to the cinema, which is great. It's a spectacle, it's an event, it's an experience. And a lot of people, including ourselves, are talking about VR experiences instead of VR games. So why don't, and for me, that's one of the reasons why we don't have a killer app. We don't sell software, we try to sell hardware, and then we find some sort of application for it, which is the wrong way around. We should have something that people absolutely want to play, and then give them the tool to do that, instead of having a tool and saying, oh, we don't know what to do with it, but try not to puke while using it. So we have to look at hardware improvements, obviously, to solve attachment rates to a degree, because it's, the easier and the cheaper it is, the more likely it can be. But many of the expensive current headsets lie abandoned at home, because there's just not that much good stuff to play. Immersion itself, as I said, is not unique. It's a little better than on a PC or on a book or in a cinema, but it's not the be-all and end-all. This can't be the one thing that VR is going for it. It's pretty immersive. So what? I can't even walk in that damn thing. We have not created games that are unique, or very few games are uniquely usable in VR, which is one of the things that everybody does. Like, hey, we do this in VR, but we also do it on other consoles. Then it's not a VR-specific title. It's just one way of displaying it. And obviously, games that are created with VR in mind, you would assume that this is something that you can only get in VR. But most of the games, that's not the case. So we keep being infatuated with being in VR. As VR developers, we often think that this is the greatest thing, and people just need to see that. This is the theory behind Oculus having Play stores in every store that you have there, and now sort of phasing them out because it doesn't really translate into sales. It's not like people just need to see it so they want to buy it. They need to be convinced in another way. So for us, it's like we're being in love with VR. So if you're in love the first time, everything about the other person is perfect. You really, it smells like roses and everything. But what you do for a long-term relationship, you've got to invest something else. You've got to give a reason other than this looks really interesting, or because otherwise the infatuation wears off. And this is, I think, where we are in VR now, not in terms of the consumer that hasn't adopted, but in terms of the people that did. They are getting, yeah, I had that, I've had it lying around at home, but it's just not that attractive anymore. After the first step, the spectacle, after that wears off, there isn't a lot of substance to most of the VR games. And that's, I think, is at the heart of the problem why we're not more dynamic, more than all the other things that are there. So what do we have to do as an industry? Obviously, we need to find unique game designs that make use of the bodily presence, of the fact that you're not only immersed as a player in a game, but actually your body is part of your interface. We need to create worlds that are different. A lot of the VR titles, a lot of the rail shooters out there, a lot of the zombie and horror games, horror is sort of a low-hanging fruit because it's working great on VR with the added immersion. But they provide experiences that are pretty much like more realistic than the PC games. Which is, if I want to see realism, I just sort of take my glasses off, look outside. There's a lot of horror and realism out there. But there are very few games that attempt to create actual things that are only possible in VR, worlds that you can only experience in VR, that you uniquely can find a way into through VR. I think we shouldn't rely on the spectacle of immersion itself to gloss over lacks of game design. One of the things that VR really hasn't solved or a lot of VR titles haven't solved yet, is at the basis of a lot of games, which is movement. Whether it's stick movement, whether it's teleport, it's all really iffy. The current title that we are doing, for example, has fully natural movement, but the way we structure levels, you're basically doing this all the time. You're running around something, but you're not realizing you're doing that, which means you feel like you're going on forever, and you feel like you're exploring a huge world. But obviously that means that we need to design specifically for VR. We need to have a lot of tricks that makes the rooms appear larger than they are when you cross them and stuff like that. But this is a conscious effort to actually sort of tackle one of the issues instead of just going the easy way and going like, hey, I'm just going to teleport over there and I'm just going to build rooms like I'm used to in a console or PC space, because this is what games look like. We haven't really found a lot of games that are specific for VR. And so the new perspectives and the experience that you need in order to make people excited about it, I think is what we as an industry need to come up with, instead of churning out more rail shooters that are just sort of easy to do. And yeah, as I said, I don't think we can blame the customers for not accepting our merchandise. I think we need to work on that merchandise in order to make it attractive enough so everybody wants it the same way that we want it. And that's it. Discussed. Thank you.
All right, do we have any questions? Come on, give me at least one question, because he was really quick. All right, you first.
Hi, this is not actually a question. I just wanted to add that this exact thing already happened with the Kinect. So maybe we can learn something about that.
Yeah, I do agree.
Lovely, cool. You got one as well?
You spoke about walking in circles.
Hang on. We're recording, so we need the microphone.
Makes sense. Sorry, you spoke about walking in circles to avoid the problem of as a different form of locomotion. Do you? I mean, to me, in my mind, that would lead to cables being twisted. That kind of thing is. How do you get around that?
There's a little more to it than just sort of walking in circles, but it's at the base of the idea. Is instead of building a huge room that I then don't know how to navigate as a designer. I can't get the player to navigate it. What we are building out is an experience that allows the player to naturally move perpetually. And it's, for example, it's about elevators, it's about changing direction, it's about guiding the user's field of view, where there's an explosion to your left, automatically you turn like this because we want you to turn. So you don't always do this because obviously, yeah, then at some time, A, you get sick again for different reasons, and B, you're sort of tangling up your cable and everything else. But it's user guidance. It's very heavy level design, but we have, for example, we extrapolate every step that you do. So if you move like 3 meters, it's actually going to feel like 5. So there, and there's doors between, there's turning around, there's actions up, down, elevators, escalators. So there's all kinds of things that you need to mix. This is a solution that'll solve for every title, for everything, but it's more about being able to give the player the illusion of being in a perpetual movement and giving the illusion of freedom to a degree that he doesn't actually have or she doesn't actually have, but without requiring him to do something that is not natural part of his bodily movement.
So I have a question real quick. So if you're working with basically like misdirection to guide people around, how would you cope with the fact that some people have smaller bedrooms than others?
Sorry?
So some people, they might have a 3 by 3 meter space to play their game in, but some people might have a 1 by 1 meter space. How would you cope with that?
We don't cope with that at all. If you've got a 1 to 1 meter space, the experience won't work. That's it. We do need, we can work with 2 meters by 2 meters, but if you actually, because 1 meter by 1 meter is like this, that's just the wrong game for that. But I think this is in itself is a lesson, because obviously the assumption that VR is the same for every consumer is also wrong. There's people that just play VR sitting down. It's just going to need a game that is specifically working for sitting down, and there's other people standing up but not having space. Again, you need a specific use case and you need a specific game for that use case. I think this is one of the things that also Switch taught us, that they have They have a use case which is you can carry your game around everywhere, which is obviously a pretty broad use case. But they try to create specific experiences for specific parts of that movability with a Labo, for example. And I think we need to do the same thing. Just saying it's VR doesn't really, cut it. It's VR in space, it's VR in a larger space, it's VR sitting down, it's standing mobile, is it in arcades? And each of these use cases needs a specific way of approaching it and giving the perfect experience to the player in this circumstance.
So do you think that's a case of developing different accessibility options for one game, or do you think that's a case of developing different games and different experiences for each location or each size room?
I think it's case-by-case basis. The more I do this now, we're doing this for 3 years now, which is not a huge amount of time, but we've gone very, very different things from B2B to, as I said, children's hospital, to arcades, to Steam title. The more I do this, the more I'm in favor of giving you a narrow use case. So really building out titles that are different for each time. Obviously there's crossovers. Like if you have a title that you can play sitting down, probably can play it standing up unless it's sort of making you seasick all the time. And then if you have the room as well, of course you can still use it while it's standing, but it's not going to make the full use or the best use of the potential that you have. So in order to reach the full potential, my current argument would be, yes, build a specific thing. Because currently it's not about cutting your audience in half. We have an audience of like 5 people anyway. Whether we've cut that in half or not, it's not going to be commercially viable. So the assumption that we need to have the broadest possible approach on such a small sample already, I don't think that has any merit currently. So you might as well go ahead and go like, hey, if I'm going to make something, I'm going to make it excellent for these 5 guys, because I don't care whether the other 5 guys are also going to buy it, because it's not going to make me rich either way.
Thank you. All right, so we've got about 3 minutes left. So if anyone has a question, we've got 2 questions.
Oh no, Patrick!
All right,
please don't ruin me.
Thank you. So, question about you mentioning you creating unique experiences for VR and not just duplicating things that are already out there for PC. But if we take a look at the Steam sort of sales boards, the top games consistently are pretty much sort of complete copies off of PC shooters in VR. And if you go into those games, they're incredibly popular and usually full of players. So they seem to be doing very well, just copying exactly what was done on PC already.
I think that is true for a shooter audience. That a lot of those are actual sort of conversions from PC titles. So they are obviously sometimes they have a brand attached to that. That obviously makes it easier. I'm not saying it's not popular and it's not a good way to do. What I'm saying is it's not going to convince people to buy the VR just for that. My point is that to have something that is genuinely moving people, it needs to be something that you can't have everywhere else. And currently, the lowest hanging fruit is basically, as I said, horror games and shooters, because the gameplay they already have is sort of well supported by VR. And I think this is going to continue to be popular. I'm not saying VR can't support an existing gameplay. I'm just going to say, I'm going to pay extra money for that. Guys that play shooters a lot tend to have a high-end PC anyway, so maybe the jump is smaller for them. But I still think it's not gonna break into a larger audience like the Switch, for example, has by just doing shooter games that you may or may not enjoy more on VR.